Let's settle in, everyone, so we can start. Good afternoon to all. Senator JV, thank you for joining me today, and to all our resource persons. Those from DOH who were here earlier in the Blue Ribbon Committee, thank you for
Recording in progress.
Thank you for your patience. So what we have before us are 13 Senate bills and the transmitted House version on the VIP, the Virology Institute of the Philippines. This is actually a subcommittee of the Committee on Science and Technology, which this representation is chairing. To recall, on December 12, 2022, this representation delivered a privileged speech on the overlapping of functions and mandates among the VIP, the CDC, and the Research Institute for Tropical Medicine. So VIP, CDC, and RITM. It was explained that the VIP would include the study of viruses and viral diseases affecting plants, animals, and humans, while RITM's focus would be on viruses affecting humans and diseases of public health importance. And RITM would remain in charge of public health laboratory testing. But the observation of this representation and a few other senators was that under the CDC bill, the RITM would be, no other word can explain, can describe it, would be chopped under the CDC bill. But then there would be a new VIP created. Yes, and so the concern was, and this is obviously what we expect our resource persons to explain, that how would they coexist? How do we manage limited public funds? We recognize that more research is always better, but we wanted to ensure that there is enough fiscal space. Our ITM has historically been underfunded. If not for the pandemic, people would still not even know who and what our ITM is. So these are just the kind of questions in our minds as policymakers, which we are very happy to hear the different ideas and perspectives of our resource persons. This representation conducted separate meetings with both DOST Secretary Solidum and DOH Secretary Herbosa, and it was agreed that a unified version for the VIP and CDC bills would be submitted. I mentioned CDC here, although it is not part of the hearings, but they are interrelated because of the reasons I explained about the creation of the CDC versus the creation of a CDC with a chop version of RITM and then a new VIP. We were told that the two agencies would come up with a unified agreement last December. We are now in receipt of DOST's version of the VIP bill, which we were told is aligned with the key agreements between the parties. But of course, it's a technical matter, and we would like to hear it directly from the experts and the representatives of the two agencies. Again, for the record, this representation has always promoted the investment in more research, in innovation, and in science-based studies and solutions. But we are just mindful of the limited fiscal space. I hope that we'll be able to address all the concerns that we are aware of during these hearings. During this hearing. Especially because this is a health-related hearing, my reminder is everybody is free to take a mobility break, especially those who've been seated with me since 2 o'clock. No need to ask permission. Konti lang tayo. If I see you're not there, I'll wait for you to come back. No problem with me. Please drink your water. And then it is technical, but I do prefer that you don't read me your lengthy position papers. I'd rather you explain. And then, we can just read these lengthy papers on our own. I think that is it for now. So before I call on a resource person, I'd like to ask my colleague, Senator J.V. Ejercito, who like me, a former chairman of the Committee on Health, and we continue to be staunch supporters. Senator JB, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. As one of the co-authors of this bill, I will instead offer a brief statement of support. No, we are here to hear the source persons. The Senate should give the VIP treatment to the proposed Virology Institute of the Philippines. In fact, we should drum up even more support for this bill through viral marketing tactics because it is a crucial piece in our fight against viral diseases. Emerging diseases have caused us much grief. The pandemic is the best example. We flattened our economy in pursuit of flattening the curve. We had to do creative surgery on the 2020 budget so we could fund our recovery. And that was not the first time that a virus cost us. We have had to cull many animals to prevent the spread of new viruses. These cost our farmers quite heavily. So kailangan talaga natin ang bill na ito to improve operational efficiencies, ramp up research, and arm us for the diseases of the future. Let us lock down our colleagues' support for this bill because prevention is always better than the cure. And proactive research is always better than reactive decision making. Again, Madam Chair, thank you for scheduling this very vital measure, which is very important after the experiences that we had during the pandemic. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator JV. And I will just submit into the record the opening statement of Senator Joel Villanueva. But I just will highlight a few portions of his statement. It says here, in the span of just 2 decades, we have borne witness to viral catastrophes: SARS, CoV-1, swine flu, MERS, CoV infection, Ebola, Zika, each leaving in its wake a trail of countless lives lost and economies burdened. Beyond human health, our agriculture and livestock industries, bedrocks of our nation's sustenance, have also suffered from the onslaught of emerging viruses. The scourge of the African swine fever in 2019 brought billions in trade losses, while the 2017 tilapia lake virus decimated vital fish stocks in Bulacan. The rapid spread of such viruses across countries and even across the globe emphasized the critical need for advanced virus surveillance, diagnosis, and response capabilities, which is crucial work to be undertaken by laboratories with adequate virology capacities. This is why we support the establishment of a National Virology Institute, essential for a strong public health response to emerging viral threats. By investing in cutting-edge research, surveillance, and diagnostic capabilities, we can safeguard public health, protect our agricultural sector, and strengthen our resilience against future viral outbreaks. So that is the gist of Senator Villanueva's opening statement. So on that note, okay. So Secretary Solidum is supposed to join us online, but he's not yet online. So we can just call on him when he's available. Here. Okay. So, Yusek Gatchalian, were you making a statement separately from Secretary Solidum, or we'll wait for him for the statement of DOST? Okay, so we'll just wait for him. Okay. And then, siguro, Dr. Montoya, I know you're very passionate about this as well, but let's wait for the secretary. So I'll give DOH first, no? Sige. And then, just so I'm clear, DOST Executive Director, may separate statement pa kayo o hindi na? Okay, so it's the secretary and then Dr. Montoya. Tama? Okay, when the secretary joins us. Okay, so we'll start with DOH, Secretary Herbosa. You ready?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We have submitted a position paper, and as you instructed, we do not have to read the statement here in the hearing. And let me just highlight the points of this.
Thank you.
When we discussed the two bills before, the CDC and the VIP, I explained to you our position. And after further study, I've discovered that we really need to have a virology and vaccine. Let me just state that what is important are the Virology and Vaccine Institute of the Philippines. And as rightfully said by our good Senator J.B. Ejercito, that our current emerging diseases and re-emerging diseases are all viral and are all of One Health, including the animal industry and the plant industry. So having this particular resource for the nation is really of paramount importance in terms of uh, delivering the services that the Department of Health would say use in the next pandemic, or they call it now the next disease X, which is the next viral infection that will propagate. So we've learned a lot, that we had many gaps, and we do hope that these bills will address one gap. This is the a group of scientists and laboratories that are able to analyze viruses that cause diseases in animals, plants, and humans. So we fully support the development of the Virology and Vaccine Institute of the Philippines. I'll end there, Madam Chair.
So I'll proceed lang with some clarificatory questions nga, Secretary, no, on that, no. So maybe Dr. Montoya can confirm the VIP would include the study of viruses and viral diseases affecting plants, animals, and humans, correct? Okay. And then meanwhile, and this has been my concern, RITM's focus has, of course, always been on humans. Is that correct? Like today, it's on humans, and it will stay with humans. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct. And so viruses affecting humans and diseases of public health importance. And then it currently is in charge of public health laboratory testing. What does that mean? I mean, that's a generic statement, no?
It is the
It is the primary.
It's a national reference laboratory. So
Okay.
what we do is all laboratories that function in different hospitals and outpatient clinics are regulated with a reference laboratory if they're coming out with accurate results. So they test this laboratory.
So they're like the FDA of the laboratories.
Yes, something
Tama
like
ba?
that. Correct,
Okay.
correct.
I told you I have to understand it as a layman because yun nga, hindi naman kami doktor ni Senator JV. Okay, okay. So they will continue to do that function.
Correct. And in fact, we've actually created several RITMs in the different sub-regional, in the Visayas and in Mindanao. Also to
Okay, and they stand alone?
Yes. Well, they all are part of, they call it a sub-national. So the national reference lab is at RITM in Alabang, and then we have others situated like in Eastern Visayas. We
Okay.
have one Research Institute of Tropical Medicine, Eastern Visayas, which is a sub-region, sub-national.
Okay.
The sub-nationals do the work for the different parts of the country.
Okay. The other concern brought to my attention is also RITM's current mandate is to develop and manufacture vaccines. Is that correct? Again, I'm using that from a layman's.
In fact, the Research Institute of Tropical Medicine was built in our unit before it was privatized in Philinvest. Was our serum institute. That's where we actually produced our old vaccines, anti-tetanus, BCG, and anti-venin. So we were producing vaccines. In fact, we were exporting them in the 1930s and 50s. So that eventually was sold during the time of President Ramos. It was privatized, but a new one was never created. What was left and carved out was the Research Institute of Tropical Medicine, which left producing BCG and tetanus anti-serum. So they were producing that, and we wanted to expand that. When I was still undersecretary, we wanted to increase that because vaccine self-sufficiency was a project at that time. So that was a project wherein we'd like to, after the Philinvest was sold, we wanted to have RITM produce it. We were supposed to have a land swap somewhere in Laguna, but I don't think it ever happened. This is what I recall from how it happened from the time of Secretary Flavier yun, President Ramos, and when that was privatized, and some of that earnings should have gotten another piece of land for a Serum Institute for a Philippine vaccine production unit. But we never did. So we used the small remaining plot land in RITM and used a portion of it for vaccine production. Parang nasubsume siya because they were geographically together before. But RITM was really a hospital. It's a research institute of tropical medicine. When JICA donated that building, it was really an assistance to the Philippines to study the many tropical diseases in the islands. And it's a hospital. When you have a hospital, you can have the hospital primarily purposed for services, primarily purposed for teaching, or primarily purposed for research. So the RITM, when it was developed, was actually designed to be primarily for research with a small capacity to be able to treat these tropical disease patients. So we treated our first HIV patients there. When we had SARS, we treated our SARS patients there. When we had what HIV, SARS, and all other illnesses that would come in, they were the lead hospital together with San Lazaro, if you remember, which is other infectious disease hospital. So it's part of our hospital system with big focus on research. Now, all hospitals actually should focus on all three: teaching, teaching and training, research, and services. Now, it really depends on the hospital's mandate where they want to focus more. So RITM became a research institute, and it created many studies. It had proposals for schistosoma vaccine. It had proposals for many types of clinical trials also for tropical diseases. So the people that work there are mostly researchers that publish knowledge or create information. Unlike, let's say, a regular hospital like East Avenue would have more services, but they also do some research and some teaching as well. So it's really dependent on what the focus is. So for me, when I look at it, so when I was asking them, so why are they taking it out and putting it in another unit? That's confusing to me, because what happens with the hospital part? Because I'd like, if we need to expand what we call a surge capacity. Remember when we had COVID, we wanted to put all our COVID and SARS patients there. So you'd need to have that kind of surge to be able to create, because the experts would be there, the researchers would be there. So that's how that thing works. So I'd still like it to be in our own hospital system rather than be put in another big organization, which they were trying to recreate a CDC for.
Yes.
So, Ma'am, I explained this to you
No,
before
in fact,
during our meeting.
yes, in our meeting in Senator Joel's office.
Correct.
But this is a little bit even clearer to me now with the history, because I didn't even realize that by chopping it up, baka yung like yung hospital function, paano nga naman yun? But anyway, today is not a discussion for CDC, so RITM is intact, correct? All right, okay. And my question is, when you say that RITM is currently producing BGC and tetanus, is that so BCG, BGC?
Huminto na rin yata.
Sorry, tagig.
Ma'am, huminto na rin yata. I don't
Huminto. O yun nga, why?
Stop na
May I
producing.
know,
Our
may
director
I
is here.
know why? Because I'd like to understand the history so that even before we entertain, as we entertain this new proposal for virology, I want to know what RITM is up to, what was its mandate, did it grow the way we intended to grow? If it did not, why? Maybe we just didn't fund it, and how will these two agencies now coexist? So what are we now, and what do we want it to be?
Good afternoon po, Senator Cayetano and Senator Ejercito. I'd like to speak in behalf of RITM. Currently, we're just manufacturing the purified Cobra antivenom. Yes, in 2000 po, the Biological Production Services, which was also located in Alabang, was closed. And that was the institution which was manufacturing several vaccines at that time. Unfortunately, I think po the property was bought by, it was privatized. So it's now the mall in Alabang. It's Fiesta, I'm not sure if it's the Fiesta Mall. A Festival Mall po, opo. So the Biological Production Services was supposedly to be transferred to RITM. Unfortunately, what remained was the BCG research lab, but the actual technology was no longer transferred to RITM. So we had some people from the BCG lab of the Biological Production Services, but they can no longer manufacture an actual BCG vaccine that could be provided to the whole Filipino people. So the technology stopped when the Biological Production Services closed, and what remained only was
Sorry,
the
can you refresh my memory? Because you said that was it? It is a joint venture because you're talking about the technology wasn't transferred. So who the
No,
private was it a private?
no, it was a
Yeah.
large institute. It was we had horses and snakes. So it was a big farm in Muntinlupa.
Apo.
And that was where, because what happens to make the venom, pinapakagat yung horse kasi the horse doesn't get affected. Then we use that to make the anti-venom for the Philippine cobra, which is what we use for. So so it required a big space. Pero because of the value of the land in Alabang, that was privatized.
Okay,
In the
so what was
privatization
privatized was the land,
land.
not but all along that institution is a government institution.
Yes, they belong to the Department of Health.
Okay,
That's,
so the part I'm confused is when you say the technology wasn't transferred by whom? Who owned the technology ba?
yung PPS po, yung Biological Production Services. So, nung nag-close po siya, wala na pong na-transfer na tao. Kakaunti po na yung nalipat sa RITM. So, yung
Sorry, Biological Production Services is under what? RITM?
under DOH po.
So it just died? Because dahil sa tao na hindi I don't understand. Hindi nga, nabenta nga yung lupa. So wala na silang opisina dahil ganon.
Wala na po, nagsara po ang
They were
BPS.
forcefully retired.
Apo. Some of them were transferred to DOH and some po were transferred to RITM. So, yung binabasa po naming history was yung purified cobra anti-venom na lang po ang naiwan for production of
Just like
anti-venom.
that, like overnight?
So, up to now po, yun pong
DOH, you said na baka there may have been a land swap because we should
Well, Madam Chair,
explore
yes,
those things.
I was already a doctor then. And for your information, after my residency training in Philippine General Hospital, I was the surgeon of RITM. That means I
Okay.
inserted the lines on kids with HIV and everything. That was my first job after training. So I know that because I would drive through the what they call
The talahib.
the talahib, but the talahib had the horses, they had the serum and vaccine laboratory of the Department of Health. And and what happened, and in fact we have a statue there, the national hero statue of triumph of science over that. It's still there in front of landmark in Philinvest. You can still see that statue. That's the original site of where this serum production is. Ayan, pinapakita niya sa inyo, ma'am. And I know for a fact because I was there, I was a surgeon of RITM. I knew there was supposed to be a land swap. I think it was supposed to be in Los Baños or UP, wherein land would become the replacement for the production, but it never happened anymore. So I don't know already what happened after that. So some of the production was subsumed. So kinuha ng RITM yung BCG at saka anti-venom. So that's why they were still producing that for a time. And then some of the other people wala na nawala na. So for a while there, we were trying to rebuild that. When I was undersecretary, we were doing the vaccine self-sufficiency project, which is doing the phase 3 and 4 of vaccine production. Kasi parang may production line yan eh. Whatever you put in, let's say the type of vaccine you want to produce, BCG or pentavalent, we were trying to produce a pentavalent vaccine production line. And that was supposed to be a PPP, but eventually what happened was they scrapped the PPP and just funded it for 700 million pesos. But the procurement never happened. I mean, I think it wasn't concluded. So the money was reverted back. So we never got our vaccine facility. So this was as far back as 2013, 2014.
Generation. Um, if RITM was a vaccine producing institute, what is the advantage now of not continuing that and then starting something new? Like, why wouldn't we just continue with RITM or do both? And not, my concern really is it had the capacity. The mandate is still there. The mandate is undertake research in prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of tropical diseases of public health importance, and then produce vaccines for the control of vaccine preventable diseases. So the mandate is still there. So I do want the question I have addressed, wherein we will still dedicate funding for this, for our ATM, because that is its mandate and it has a rich history.
Senator Cayetano, at the moment, we are producing the purified cobra antivenom, but we have a very small facility.
Yeah.
And
so you're limited by your facility.
yes, we are limited by our facility, and the people's technology that we have is only for the cobra antivenom. If we are going to manufacture other kinds of vaccines, like apart from the cobra antivenom, we have to capacitate our employees or our technical staff for the production of other kinds of vaccines.
Yes. And,
And-
that's basic. I think
Apo.
Senator JV and I can understand that. It
And
won't
the-
happen
Apo.
overnight.
Yes po. And the facility itself, if it will be placed inside of the premises of our ITM, will not be sufficient
Okay.
to produce po other
Sige.
vaccines.
Okay.
We have done our vaccine self-reliance report, the VSRP1, which is the Vaccine Self-Reliance Project 1. This was submitted already to the Department of Health. And in that particular report, it was mentioned that it will not be beneficial or practical for our ITM to continue the BCG manufacturing because it will be more costly to the Philippine government rather than buying that from other production facilities outside of the Philippines. What was recommended in that VSRP report was that we can have initially a fill and finish facility, which can be a PPP or a joint venture with other external partners, and then probably later on have a manufacturing facility concentrating more on the flu vaccine and the pentavalent vaccine. And we need probably a different site apart from what we have in our ITM because the RITM's facility is very small for a bigger manufacturing facility. And furthermore po, our animal farm that we have, we do not own our current animal farm. We are renting that on a lease basis with the UP Los Baños, and we are having negotiations in the future with UP Los Baños because our contract with them for a free lease has already ended, and they might probably be charging a minimal amount for lease of the said facility, which is more or less 2 to 5 hectares in area. But to be able to produce a greater number of the purified cobra antivenom, we need to have a 10-hectare facility of land to have more horses where we can inject the serum, where we can inject the venom and get the serum for the production of the purified cobra antivenom.
Have is 2.25. Is that what you said? 2.25 in Los Baños?
2 hectares po.
And you need 10.
And we need 10
Okay.
hectares.
Okay. So for the existing project pa lang, to expand it, you need to go from 2 to 10.
Opo.
Okay. And then to consider manufacturing the flu vaccine and the pentavalent, you need a facility plus manpower that you will train.
Yes po.
And
Alright.
your suggestion is a joint venture or a
Yes
PPP?
po, or a PPP in the future. We are undergoing a VSRP2, which is a feasibility study, to have the detailed costing of a probable vaccine facility under a PPP or a joint venture project. And once we have the feasibility study, we will be submitting to the Department of Health.
Okay. Senator JV, any questions?
Anyway, where do you plan to expand dun po rin sa UP Los Baños? Because you need 10 hectares for the facility to be able to.
No, sir,
function
because the animal farm that we are staying now is owned by the UP Los Baños, the UP system, and we previously had a an agreement with them to be able to use the facility for free, but the contract has already ended sometime in 2021 or early 2022, and we are now negotiating, and they wanted us now to pay a few cost for the lease of the area. So we are looking for other possible areas which we can acquire to be able to set up a big animal farm. So yun po, kasi we need a bigger animal farm so that we can have more horses for the purified cobra antivenom, because only our ITM produces the cobra antivenom in the whole of the country.
But before, siguro si Sec Herbosa,
Can
Madam
I-
Chair, I'm really, it's really sad to hear about yung history just because the land was sold. Na-close down na yung ating vaccine production facility. So ever since that time, talagang wala na ho tayo. It was limited to the antivenom. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Nagkaroon pa po ng parang research and development arm on BCG, but it never scaled up to production and distribution anymore.
Sec, please.
Thank you. I just like to clarify some of the things that we were hearing. No? So what's being produced as antivenin is not a vaccine. It's a biological product. It's an antivenom. So you need the horses. So, pag nakakagat ka ng cobra, na Philippinensis, we need that. And the problem
Kakagat
with
sa
that
isang taon.
antivenin, pakunti ng pakunti kasi kumukonti
Konti
na rin
na lang
yung
ang cobra.
Before, we had a lot of those. I would see a lot in the emergency department. But now, it's very rare in the urban areas. But I know in Eastern Visayas, in
Still happens.
Tacloban, they still have a lot of snake bites. So they sometimes require that, and it's very hard to get that unless you have one. So that's a biological. To produce the vaccine, it doesn't require a lot of space. Because as you said, all you need is a fill and finish production line. What you need and what is produced in the virology lab is the source virus. So they will weaken a virus, and that's the one that will be multiplied, and they attenuate either live or a dead virus, and then that is the one that is put in a fill and finish. So you can actually buy some of that internationally, what you call a bulk purchase of the source for the vaccine, which is cheaper than buying them in vials already for injection for public health. So if we had the fill and finish, we can store and then put them in vials and then distribute them nationally at a lower cost. Many of the countries around us,
The
BCG,
fill and finish.
pentavalent, flu. So the more high-tech laboratories are the ones that store the primary. And this is what I hope the Virology Institute will be able to produce for us. That they can produce the source virus. They won't produce the vaccine. They will produce the, what do you call this? So we will now go to, so we now go to the level of why the vaccine production was closed because of technology. We were unable to modernize our vaccine production. Outmoded na yun, 1950s model. And what happened was we created, the newer model was to create biosafety level 3 and 4 for viruses, because you have to put them in a lab that has security. And to be able, napanood nyo siguro yung movie na Outbreak, ano ba yun, yung meron pang mga, the scientists cannot just enter. That's because they have to be secure with the viruses. That's the type of laboratory I expect DOST to be able to have for the Philippines, so that we can now study viruses that happen in our agriculture, in our aquaculture, or in our plants, or in our humans.
Question is, and Secretary Solidum is already online, so I want to pass it on to him, no? But my question is, when you as Secretary of Health say, this is what I expect DOST to produce, why would it not be our ITM anymore? Because if we find the fundings for this, then it's just as legislators, it's just a question of, do we give it to DOH or do we give it to DOST? Yun lang naman sa amin, kasi the technical reasons for that, we listen to you. So why did we end that function of RITM? Kasi it's their mandate pa rin, ha? So either they do this or we amend the law, because this is their mandate to produce vaccines.
To produce that can
Produce
still
the
be their
vaccines.
mandate.
So you are
But
now
the
talking about
science
the
and
production of
research-
what do you call this? Hindi ko naintindihan yung sulat ko. Something virus.
The source virus,
Source.
the attenuated virus.
Source.
The
So
one
the
that will
production
be-
of the source virus is different from the vaccine production itself.
correct.
So the VIP will produce the source virus and then babalik sa RITM, because I also heard that VIP will not manufacture vaccine. So ibabalik yan sa RITM or ibabato naman yan sa private? Kasi kailangan buo yung kwento, di ba?
Yes, it doesn't matter whether it's private or RITM, because even the proposal for the VSRP, that's the new term, the Vaccine Self-Reliance Project, used to be called the Vaccine Self-Sufficiency Project.
The
That
Vaccine
will-
Self-Reliance Project is the production of the
mass
source
production.
virus,
Yeah,
or no?
For example, they identified 2 pentavalent vaccines, which are 5 of the 9 mandatory vaccines
Okay,
that we
okay.
give. DPT, HIV, Haemophilus influenza, and hepatitis B.
Okay.
So we'll put them all in one vial so that we can give it to all our children below 5. So
Correct.
instead of buying
So-
them as a finished product, we just buy, or they can produce the source, and then we manufacture and multiply it.
So to repeat, the VIP will produce the source, and then you said it doesn't matter if RITM is the one who produces the vaccine or private. Why doesn't it matter? Wouldn't we want to produce it? Do we have the capable? I mean, if you tell me it takes 5 years, or it takes 5 years, di ba? Wouldn't we want to build up that capability? I note, Dr. Montoya, that you're raising your hand. I just, my ability to absorb all this technical is limited, as you will probably understand. So let me just finish my question, and then then Secretary, yes.
I'm with you on that one. I would prefer, if you ask me
Okay,
as
you
secretary,
would prefer.
I would
Okay.
prefer the government produces its own
Okay,
vaccine.
okay.
But if that requires having a private partner, it also is fine with me, a joint venture. Now, the third option is purely private, outsourcing it. That's a problem in terms of health security. So
Yeah.
when there is a pandemic and there's an increase in demand, you cannot just push the
Yeah,
private
yeah.
sector to
So
they'll
if-
probably increase the
yeah.
price.
So
But if it's the
yes,
government can surge and
exactly,
increase it.
exactly. And I just want to read to put on record, my staff just pointed out that under the DOST version of the VIP bill, the VIP may undertake the manufacturing of its developed vaccines whenever deemed appropriate and necessary upon approval or directed of the President of the Philippines. So that's something that I'd like to clarify as we move forward, na so si VIP na ba o babalik nga natin sa RITM para naman clear tayo sa direction ng dalawang agencies na ito. So do you want to say something quickly, or do you want to defer to your secretary who is on? Oh, siya muna, and then I will call you. Sige. So can we call secretary as Ayan, okay. Hello, Sec Solidum. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Senator Pia. Good afternoon, Senator.
Senator JB. Yeah. So Secretary, you may explain now the importance of this measure, why you want to pursue it. I had earlier expressed the earlier observations that I have received, that I have having studied the CDC bills for almost 3 years. The concern that I raised with you during meetings na may overlapping ba tayo dito. So what was explained to us just now is that the objective would be for VIP to produce the source virus and then RITM to produce. So whatever you want to say about it, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, Senator, thank you for inviting me. The concern that we really have for the country is that we need to approach the current problems as a one system, one health, where we look at potential impact of viruses in humans, animals, and plants. And with regards to the importance of having it here in the Philippines, we have seen this in the experience that we had for COVID-19, and the fact that biodiversity is so high in the country, and there are issues that might really trigger the development of these zoonotic diseases within the country. Now, as to the operations of what VIP would do, we will do the research coordinate things and everyone can actually participate. But as to the production of vaccine, as mentioned in the proposal, if necessary and upon instruction, we can actually also help in the production. But of course, we would want to defer if there is already an existing system and strengthened system for RITM, that they can also do that. And for us, as long as we can produce at the right time, if necessary, the vaccine, that would be very good for the Filipino mga kababayan po natin and the country.
Thank you, Secretary. Are you going to be able to stay with us so that we can dialogue with you while we discuss with the other resource persons?
I have to do another intervention in the ministerial meeting at OECD,
Okay, sige.
Madam
Okay.
Senator.
Sige. Anyway, your team is here, so we'll just discuss
Yes,
the details
yes.
with them. Okay. Thank you,
Thank you,
Secretary.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, okay. Thank you. So si Senator Bongo also wanted to join us, but he said to allow us to continue, he asked me to just express his statement of support for this bill. So let's proceed with the discussion. Anything? Just intervene, eh? Sige. So ikaw na, Dr. Montoya.
Yes.
Go
First
ahead.
of all, honorable senators, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. First of all, on the question of who takes the function of vaccine manufacturer, let us first think of there are many possible scenarios. And one scenario which we have to consider is that technology locally developed in the Philippines, or is it technology developed by other countries that's going to be transferred to the Philippines? Meaning it's not an in-house technology. It was not developed within our ITM. It's just going to adapt the technology and use it for and manufacture vaccines. So those are different, two different situations. If we talk of the pentavalent vaccine, the other vaccines already been mentioned, especially those including the EPI, these are already being manufactured in outside of the country. Many countries have been doing this already, and all the country has to do is adopt that technology through a formal licensing agreement with the innovators or the developers. And now, whether that will be done by a government entity or a public-private or private entity, it depends. My thinking is that we have to be flexible. The only reason why that provision was put in the bill, which is, if you notice, Madam Chair, the VIP may do the manufacturing is only in the event that it is a national emergency and that there is no adapter from the private sector or no other existing entity that can do it. Then we are obliged,
Understand.
deputized by the president, maybe that we can do it. Of course, assuming that we have the capacity, which we hope will be there when that happens.
Well, but that's something that you have to fight for.
Yes,
if
of course.
If you as health advocates believe that that is something we should be prepared for, di dapat insist nyo na may capacity tayong ganun. Otherwise, di ba, that's for you to
Yeah.
tell us na
Yes, yes.
this may happen, baka magkaswapangan, so we have to be prepared.
As we experienced already during the COVID-19 pandemic, we were actually scrambling for the COVID-19 vaccine, which was developed by other countries. And of course, their priority is their own citizens before
Yes.
other countries get hold of the vaccine.
But if we use that as an example, did they actually transfer technology to any other entity other than the pharmaceutical that owned the technology? Did they, such that a country that purchased it was able to
Yeah.
manufacture? They did?
Yeah, I was about to say that the mechanism was actually already instituted by the WHO through the what we call mRNA technology. If you remember, the Pfizer and most of the popular vaccines during the COVID-19 are basically using the mRNA technology, which means it does not require big facilities because it doesn't require big culture vats that would require growing the virus itself. All you need is just knowing the genetic makeup of that virus, and that can be produced by a surrogate organism, usually bacteria, that produces the proteins, and that's the one you replicate. The WHO made use of that, made that available to countries But the problem is, even if we wanted to do that, we lack one critical component to be able to make use of the technology. Our FDA should have the competence to actually monitor the operations of such a facility. And I know that the FDA is working on that. They are trying to reach level 3, which is required for us to actually start a local vaccine industry. There has to be an oversight, and that has to be FDA, and has to be have the competence to do that, and that to be certified by the WHO. Yun po.
Question, you were nodding your head that other countries were able to avail of that mRNA and they just produce it on their own?
Yes, because they have the FDA at that competence
they have
level.
that level
Yes,
3.
yes.
But how did, just from my understanding, how does that work? Do they have to purchase it? Is that intellectual property of, let's say, Pfizer, intellectual
Yes.
property? So instead of buying the finished product, the vaccine in a vial, you buy the technology.
Yeah, it's basically technology transfer.
Okay.
Uh,
And other countries did that. Like what country?
Yeah,
Yes.
because I was in the COVID vaccine during that time. So I knew for a fact that in Indonesia already had the vaccine production fill and finish. So when they bought Sinovac, which we also bought, we bought ours filled in vials. Indonesia bought it in bulk. And then they had a company, a private company, that did the finish, the fill and finish. So that was cheaper.
Is the fill and finish literally yon, tapos parang kumbaga sa gamot na inuwi mo, dinadagdagan mo ng tubig, parang ganun ba yun?
Basically parang ganun. Yeah, and then Thailand was also producing vaccines. So nag-ano na sila,
But they sell
did
that
the
under
AstraZeneca.
But they sell that under the labels of whether it's Sinovac or
Correct.
AstraZeneca.
They
Pero
just
they call it
outsource-
fill and finish.
They outsource the final manufacturing part.
Got
It's
it,
like
got
a
it.
franchise of
Okay. So probably slightly cheaper. There's a bit of savings because they do the final
And then-
stage.
maybe as an update, I was also in a meeting of the ASEAN in New York to talk about the production of a regional vaccine production facility. But that means we will produce different vaccines, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, for the region, for the 1 billion people of the ASEAN, so that we will have a regional vaccine security. And all these production lines can be used in time of a pandemic. Because what happened during the pandemic was we lacked all of this. So they were all being produced in Europe and we had to wait until our order is already in production. That's why we waited longer. So now there's idea to build that capacity in the ASEAN region also. But the idea of the one pushing for it is World Bank to loan us and be able to produce vaccines in different countries in ASEAN. But we are going to produce different vaccines. So we'll buy from each other and then use it for our national program. But each one has the capacity for an emergency again to actually produce it.
If we were to pursue that, which that's the objective, that would be what? RITM? Or all you want, or are you going the route of FDA? As long as FDA can regulate, you'll pass that on to a private? Or was the idea nga
So
it's
that's
a
the first
government?
step. The FDA
Is the first step.
to level up
Yes,
to level 3.
yes, clear,
That's the first step.
Clear, but the second step nga, as we see it, for security purposes, dapat RITM.
So
or
the
some
proposal
other,
of RITM is a vaccine self-reliance project. So it's
Yes.
a PPP, I think, right? It's a PPP because it's listed in the PPP unit.
Yes, sir. Either a PPP or a joint venture po.
so that would be a PPP with a pharmaceutical that is currently manufacturing
Yes po.
either the pentavalent or something
Or
like
the
that.
flu vaccine.
Okay,
Or feasibility 1, the VSRP 1 po.
okay. Sige. Anyway, sige, Dr. Montoy, you can continue.
Although there are some countries who actually are talking of what we call GPOs, or government pharmaceutical organizations. It's owned by government and they really go into manufacturing. But usually these are technologies already there. They don't develop it in-house. So they just get the technology and then do the manufacturing. They did this for antiretroviral drugs for HIV in Thailand, for example.
Yes.
So there were some suggestions that we pursue that path, but that will be, of course, very intensive, resource intensive, because we have to build the government entity that will be doing that. If that is the case, then RITM. But let me just clarify the other path, which is for in-house technology.
Yes.
That's the purpose of the VIP. The VIP intends to develop the antigen from the very start, the vaccine, up to the preclinical stage. So that is being proven to be efficacious or protective using animal models or tests. And then it will now be offered to an adapter for it to proceed to the clinical trials, no, from phase 1 to phase 3. And that can be, as I said, it can be a company, it can be government if there is one, it can be RITM. So we are not boxed in. But the VIP, its job is really, one, to develop technologies from the start. Usually the viruses, because, for example, virus-talking viruses, the viruses that are seen in the Philippines should be the viruses that will be used as a reference for the vaccine development. Because viruses differ. You cannot actually say that the virus in the US is similar to the virus in the Philippines. No? And that applies not just to virus, but even to bacteria and all the other organisms. So we have to be sure that it is really something that will really benefit Filipino population based on the prevailing strains that we have in the Philippines. The one mentioned by the Secretary Herbosa is yung Sinovac. It is actually the dead virus. It's the inactivated virus, which they cultured, of course, and killed it through an inactivation process. And that's the one that's put into the ampules or vaccines. It's not mRNA technology, because mRNA technology does not require the presence of the virus itself. That is why it's a technology that can easily enable replication and adoption by different governments and companies, because it will not require that much resource to have the capacity to have vaccines.
Sa amin? Asa ka na? Okay.
I'm not gonna. I was going
Pwede,
to
go
ask,
ahead.
because it seems that the mRNA technology is the newer one. Would that be a direction of the Virology Institute? I saw some of your experts have expertise in mRNA.
That definitely is one of the technologies that will be used by the VIP.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes
Take
po.
the floor again.
I'll just give a brief background on the questions regarding the biological production services. This is a history which was part of the VSRP1. So vaccine production was undertaken under the Biological Production Services, which was a facility under the DOH from 1950 to 1998. And then the vaccines produced included BCG, PCAV, tetanus toxoid, rabies vaccine, cholera vaccine, anti-sera for Salmonella, Shigella, cholera, among others. And then the BPS then was an agency independent of RITM. However, in 1998, the property covering BPS was bought by a private developer. So in 2000 po, the RITM acquired the manufacturing equipment to manufacture a Bacillus calmette-guerin vaccine, which is BCG. However, it wasn't used and unutilized for commercial production. So, up to now po, we just manufacture the Philippine Cobra Antivenom. Yun po yung part ng BPS. Thank you po.
But I'm just curious, when the property was sold, was it kaya because, well, if anybody knows, was it because, as Secretary Herbosa said, it was no longer keeping up with the technology that sabi nyo nga, 1950s pa yon. Kaya therefore, benta na lang natin, then let's do something else. They do a modern one. Parang ganun yon. Okay. Um, I still need to understand why would why would we want a virology institute to do this versus strengthening our ITM or even expanding its mandate?
Uh, we still want to strengthen our ITM and in fact produce many RITM around the country. So
Okay.
replicate its production also in terms of all the other aspects of tropical disease interventions, not areas for isolation, what you call this, lab diagnostic testing. Remember, there were also the reference lab for our COVID test, so which ones were valid or not, right? And then there were also our reference lab for all other laboratories. So there is a function in terms of what our ITM should do, and then there's the clinical part, as you heard from Jimmy Montoya. After the vaccine is produced, it has to go into a phase 3, which is clinical trial. That's where you need a research institute like hospital, wherein you can trial patients in a clinical trial lab. We're actually producing one clinic laboratory like that from UP. UP Manila will do one in Clark. It's a clinical research hospital as well. So because that's an area where many of the new drugs or discoveries can be put on a phase 3 trial before it's put out in the market as phase 4. So ayan, madaming phases, ma'am, yan, from bench research, which is the laboratory, all the way to clinical phase 3 human trials, all the way to commercial production.
So it's clear that RITM, independent of VIP, has a lot of room for growth and you have that vision in mind. Within the next, between the time that we start really dissecting the provisions of this measure, are you capable of giving us a ballpark figure of how much investment that will entail? Obviously, not just one budget season, but maybe over 10 budget seasons. I don't know. Can you do that?
It depends on the diseases that are emerging or
Okay.
re-emerging, because we struggle with different diseases every year and
Yeah.
every decade, and so we project
But I
based
mean,
on
what
the
is your
high burden.
benchmark? But I mean, you have to be prepared for something. So what?
Well, of course, for TB, for HIV, for dengue,
O
these are
yan,
the high
kunyari, yan pa
burden
lang. O yan pa
countries.
lang.
So yan, kailangan ko yan because for MDR testing, making sure the reference labs that are tested for in the
So
different
yan, hindi pa nga yan
countries.
emerging diseases, di ba? They're already
Existing
existing.
and are big problem.
So yun, dun pa lang,
Kailangan ko na
ano yung budget nun for RITM alone?
depend, so that will be testing. That will be mostly testing.
Testing. Okay.
Testing TB patients. Also for the other ones. It's actually subsumed based on their yearly proposals. RITM has yearly proposals for their budget and all the specialty
Yeah.
hospitals.
Okay. No, the reason I ask is because I refuse to have another hearing na maging blue ribbon hearing pa to years from now na pinabayaan natin yung kinuwento nyo sa akin that RITM died the kind of death that's I didn't even know those stories na tungkol sa lupa pa. Basta ang sa akin lang, alam ko that it's been underfunded. I don't want to have to go back 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and like, oh, pinayagan natin yung VIP, tapos lahat nung napakadali naman low-hanging fruit sa RITM, hindi man lang natin ginawa. So, I want to make sure that at least me as chairman of this subcommittee, I'm conscious of that. I'm conscious of the role of RITM, and we don't lose sight of what we need to do to support RITM, because starting from zero with VIP is going to cost a lot, and I don't want it to be at the expense of something that's already existing. That's something that should be continually supported. Like yung RITM nga nun, hindi na na-support. 'Di ba? Hindi na siya nag-grow. So ayoko nung ganun. I'm not saying VIP is not important. Don't take this out of context. I'm just saying that this is an existing institution. What do we do to support it? Because on its own, it has its mandate.
That's correct, and this is where the syntax where you were proponent for becomes very important, because since the time we passed syntaxes, we were able to modernize most of our DOH hospitals, complete with equipment and modern laboratories. In fact, sometimes better than what is available in the private hospitals. And some private hospitals had admitted to that the technology in our DOH hospitals have exceeded those in the private. That's something we're able to do for our ITM. I think some of the stuff that they request are provided for by legislature when we put it in tier 1. So, ma'am, yung promise ko na to actually, yun nga, meron pa tayong subnational RITM areas that we are building. So, commitment na yan for the DOH modernization for UHC, because we need to provide these services to all the Filipino people. So, we're improving all the 87 DOH hospitals in toto. And that's the budget you give us every year when we ask for tier 1, newer equipment, newer laboratory, and all that stuff. So, hindi papabayaan, ma'am.
Wala ng tao, di na pabayaan talaga, 'di ba? So I don't want that to happen. In a way, I take ownership that under my watch, I don't want that to happen. Na buhos lahat ng ano doon, pati professionals natin, buhos lahat sa virology, pati lahat ng incentives sa Virology Institute. Tapos si DOH, di na makarecruit ng doktor kasi lahat na nilagyan ng napakaraming incentive yung virology. Doesn't work that way. You also have this whole system in place that has to be taken care of. Yun lang naman yung what I'm looking out for.
Ma'am, let me just cite an example. Beside me is my newest undersecretary, Undersecretary Glenn Bagao. He's the former medical center chief of Cagayan Valley Regional Medical Center. In my early months, he brought me there to inaugurate a communicable disease laboratory. In fact, the people that were there were trainees or graduates of RITM. Is that correct? They are graduates of RITM. So that's what's happening. RITM becomes that node for infectious disease specialists that actually grow, and then their directors build them, supplement, and they all coordinate. It's like a network as well. Baka you want to explain the communicable disease?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Yes, as mentioned by Secretary Ted, I was former medical center chief of the Cagayan Valley Medical Center, a 1,000-bed hospital, Apex Hospital. So just recently, we inaugurated our communicable disease building, complete with laboratory, modern laboratory equipment. And this was to address supposedly the pandemic, because during the time that we had the pandemic, everybody was not prepared. So we didn't have any isolation facilities. And so we constructed a new communicable disease building wherein it is not just intended for COVID-19, but for other communicable diseases. Thank you, Madam.
So let me just get statements, no, from the different resource persons, so at least we have a complete record, and then the next step will be technical working group. Yeah, Secretary Herbosa, I just want to also clarify, because when I mentioned the concern I had with regards to the my perceived overlapping functions, no, which has more clarity now between RITM and VIP, and then we were awaiting the unified version of the two bills, no, the VIP and the CDC. The VIP bill and the CDC bill are both considered priority measures, no? So, yung concern that RITM would be chopped up in the CDC will no longer happen, because you wrote us just recently that the CDC bill, and I think you said it in passing just
Yes.
during your opening statement, that it's no longer a priority.
Ma'am, it still is a priority, but it's not in the form that it was actually proposed. In fact, when after further review, because remember when we did the conversation in Senator
Yeah,
Ga-
early on.
I was new.
Yes.
And I did not know all about the CDC. So now I had more in-depth study and questioning of how they were trying to frame it. It seems that they're trying to chop up blocks of the Department of Health and putting it in a CDC, in a new institute of CDC, which I didn't like, because I said the way to fight a new COVID is to strengthen your own health system. So if you're going to break up a house and expect that the next bagyo will be protected from that house while you're still constructing it, you're wrong. I'd rather look at the house and strengthen the windows, the doors, and put the rooms that are important. So
That from your statement, that you want to strengthen these individual units.
correct.
First.
Correct. So
First,
it's
at
not
least.
that I'm against the CDC bill. I just want to see what the gaps are. For example, we have disease surveillance by the Epidemiology Bureau. We have emergency response by the Health Emergency Management Bureau. We have the hospitals. We have local epidemiology surveillance. So in essence, we have CDC, but we don't have high-end laboratories like the VIP that they want to produce. That's a BSL level 3 or level 4. Genome centers that are needed in other places. So these are all parts of the big puzzle that I just want to put together. So my direction of the CDC direction, and the US CDC is here already, and I'm discussing with them because they established a Philippine office, and I think it's because of our relations with they are willing to assist me in strengthening our capacity to be able to have our own autonomy in fighting the next disease X or the next virus. So it's my idea is it's like strengthening a team. You have a team, you need a center or you need a goal. Those are the ones you get in to get the championship level. So that's my analogy to it. The way I'm directing CDC direction now is where are we strong and what do we need? And then that's where we will put it in. So the virology is something that is an addition to that capacity, to that whole system, yes.
It's not an issue with you that it's under the DOST leadership. And do you foresee, I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, okay naman kami ni Secretary Solidum, but I just want to put on record that seamless ba ang the way the relationship will work, the little understanding that I have now on the production of the source virus versus the possible production by RITM, fairly seamless naman yon.
Ma'am, I'll remind you the statements kanina. It's really a plant, animal, and human virology laboratory. So it's even bigger. So I really love that the DOST will be the one, because kami sa DOH, we cannot take care of the animals and the plants. But that virology institute will have all those experts in virology in plants, animals, and humans as well. So it's bigger. It's the One Health agenda. And then pagdating sa humans, we will connect. In fact, they can still collaborate with RITM for their human virus, and they will. So or San Lazaro Hospital.
Question. I have a question. Obviously, the Department of Health is for the health of humans. No, obviously, that's the mandate. But in other countries, to the extent that the condition, the exposure, the vulnerabilities of plants and animals may affect humans, then does that not allow you to create an agency under DOH that studies this?
Yes, ma'am. So this is what's happened. No? For example, countries, I'll name, for example, Australia. Australia is very protective with their animal species and flora and fauna.
Extremely, because if
And
you try to go to Australia, talagang
They won't let you enter anything living.
kakalkalin talaga nila yung bag mo
Or the,
to make sure both New Zealand and Australia are very
Correct.
different from any other country.
and they call it
that
their
I visited.
biosecurity
Yes,
protocol. Their biosecurity protocol is based on their plants and animal protection, and a little bit on humans, because if you have disease, they will also mention that. And that's attached to the Department of Agriculture, their Ministry of Agriculture. So it really doesn't matter where you attach it, based on where your focus is. For example, the UK used to have Public Health England, and then the National Health Service, which is the hospital. They dissolved Public Health England and created the National Health Security Agency. So in fact, the original proposal for our bill, when I discovered the CDC, I liked the earlier name. The earlier name was National Health Security Authority. That was one of the original proposals of the House bill, the National Health Security. And I think it would fit. Right. Disease Prevention Authority, the National Disease Prevention Authority. But that to me, I think, was better than the center, because my question to my people was, why are you calling it a center? We don't use that terminology. We use bureau, department, right? And they couldn't answer me because it was a US center. So we cannot replicate. Oh, and then center, is that higher than a bureau director? Is that so? So there were many questions they couldn't answer. But if you had an authority like what you call the other, we have a definition for what an authority is in the Philippine government. So pwedeng ganon. So maybe that's the direction we can go later on. A national security authority or disease prevention authority that can help build a parallel to what the CDC has, the US has in the CDC.
My staff just gave me a time check. I have another event, so let me make sure that we can call on all the agencies here. Now we have FDA, DA. Is DNR here also? Wala. So just FDA and DA and DFA. Tama ba? Okay, so can we get a statement from FDA? Maria Victoria Kalub. She here or no? There you are.
Good afternoon po, Madam Chair. So the stand of FDA naman po kasi is we support the DOH stand on the regarding this VIP. We just want to be clarified ano po yung magiging function ng VIP, up to what extent, or coming from the discussions if they would pursue the production or hanggang dun lang po siya sa source organism.
Okay.
Yes, and then later on, we would just follow the command of our head office, our Secretary of Health, and in the yung sa clamor naman kanina na nasabi na FDA is not yet ML3, maturity level 3. In terms of the market naman kasi or the source nagagamit nung magiging production nila, if it's just local naman, hindi siya nagmamatter if it's not ML3 pa ang FDA. Ang kailangan lang doon is any manufacturer should have a license to operate yung kanilang facilities and their product be registered with the FDA. So, hindi po siya nakaano doon sa pagiging maturity level 3. Maturity level 3 is only critical if you would be, we would be exporting the locally produced vaccines or biologicals into other countries kasi yun po yung magiging basihan ng importing country from our side. And rest assured, ang FDA naman po is coming up with strategies. Currently, meron po siyang ongoing na rehabilitation ng isang facility ng laboratory for a vaccine laboratory. And we are hoping na maayos siya within 2026 and maging functional siya before the end of our midterm ni Director General Sakate. So that's one of his major legacy for the FDA. So in full support naman po kami with the Secretary of Health mga plans. Yun po. Thank you.
Okay. Sige, siguro in the TWG, we'll just ask you to make sure that you're clear about what you need from them and what you're expected, kasi she's saying that for locally produced vaccines hindi kailangan. I won't go into it now, just so long as you're all on the same page. Okay, so let me call on Dr. De La Peña from the Department of Agriculture.
Good afternoon po, Madam Chair. I'm Dr. De La Peña from the Bureau of Animal Industry. The Bureau of Animal Industry strongly supports the establishment of the Virology Institute of the Philippines. And the Bureau of Animal Industry has also a mandate to conduct animal health researches, specifically on animal viruses affecting our country's animal population. And we focus our implementation of researches on the conduct of animal health researches for determining the animal viruses that is prevalent in the Philippines. But for researches on development of diagnostic kits and vaccines, it's not our priority, and we are glad that we will have this Virology Institute of the Philippines, so that they would be the suitable agency to do this researches. So that would be our position. And for other comments, for the DA, because the Bureau of Plant Industry were not able to attend this hearing, so the Department of Agriculture will be coming up with comments to be submitted soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we will ask DFA, Ms. Maria Luella Duarte.
Good evening po, Senator Pia. We also submitted a position paper and a supplemental position paper. So I will just point out the 4 points. Call out the 4 points that we mentioned there, because we are basing on the bills that were submitted. So for the governing board, it is manifested herewith that it is sufficient to list the member as Undersecretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs, because in some bills they specified Undersecretary for International Economic Relations, but he is also our head for the APEC, so he's always traveling. And if there are meetings and he needs to be there.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
details naman for the TWG,
Yes.
so don't worry about
And
it.
then the second point is international agreement. We are ready to provide legal and other forms of assistance to the
Okay.
prospective VIP with the usual laws like Executive Order 292 of 1987, Executive Order 459 of 1997, and the Memorandum Circular, which all pertains to international agreements. And then for the intellectual property, we are thinking it is advisable to include the IPOFIL, especially if there is VIP developed intellectual property they will be producing. And lastly, about procurement of specialized materials, we feel that the Government Procurement Policy Board should also be either an observer, a consultant, or a full-fledged member of the governing board, because highly scientific purposes, procurement can be confusing and would require expert inputs to properly follow the law. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Let's call on DBM, Attorney Trisha Baraan.
Good evening, Madam Chair. So for the DBM, ma'am, on the funding provision po, we would like to express that we support the bill, but we recommend that the funding for the purpose be charged against the annual GA, because earmarking of funds po will definitely deplete po our available resources considering po the fiscal position of our country today, ma'am. Thank you.
My staff was just clarifying that different bills had different types of earmarking, but the version of DOST is the version that is acceptable to DBM.
Thank you po.
Any final words? I've basically called on everyone here, and the details I still have to study. Just wanted this preliminary hearing. Did you want to say something, Dr. Montoya? Are you saying?
Yeah, just very briefly, ma'am, just to summarize our, of course, our request that this be approved and passed into law is that there are unique characteristics of the VIP, the way it is structured, the way we propose it. First, it will actually be the steward for the National Virology Research Agenda. We encourage the networks. They can do the researches, but someone has to orchestrate all of these researches to be aligned with national priorities that are generated through a consultative process that will also involve the implementers, among others, and also to ensure that there's no duplication. So that's one which is not yet existing. And that will be the function, one of the functions of the VIP.
Why can't that just be a DOST function?
It is very specific for a particular institute, ma'am, because whereas in the health sector, we have the PNHRS Act of 2013, which specifically mentions that PCHRD will be the steward for the National Unified Health Research Agenda. It is a broad agenda. It does not focus on a specific area which has to be led by a particular lead entity, and this will be for the VIP. Secondly, is it will provide the venue wherein there will be diffusion of expertise and foreign and local scientists can work together. And not only that, Filipinos or scientists based abroad who are of Filipino ancestry can be provided access to a facility, world-class. They can do their work here with Filipino scientists, so there will be diffusion through the Balik Scientist Program. And then lastly, if I may say, it precisely exemplifies the One Health concept. Maybe, Madam Chair, you already been hearing about One Health. What is One Health? It has to be a very good grasp and understanding of how the ecosystem works, looking at how plants, animals, humans, and the environment interact with each other. As you probably realize, the COVID-19 pandemic, how did it start? These are theories, but it started from animals. The barrier was breached, and it actually went to humans. That cannot happen if we work in silos. Scientists working with bats, for example, are working in their own laboratory. Human scientists are working in hospitals. The venue, the VIP, will be exactly providing that venue wherein all of the scientists will be working together to really follow the One Health approach. Because we all know that the disease X that's been discussed will really be similar to COVID-19. It will really be a virus that will breach the barrier between the animals and humans. And so that is why we have to be prepared to that, providing the One Health setting, which the VIP will actually provide. And the world-class facility that will be provided for will be an open facility, which I'd like to mention. Researchers, maybe from other institutions, they want to create the capacity to also do virology research. They can do that using our facility. Of course, we'll have certain arrangements for that, but that is also the purpose of having this facility in place, similar to what the Crick Institute is doing in the UK. The Crick Institute is the biggest biomedical research facility in Europe. What does it do? It provides laboratory space wherein university researchers not connected with the Crick Institute can work there using world-class equipment and facilities and come up with good researches. So that is also one of the things that we would like to happen with the VIP. Yun lang, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, okay. No, I mean, I understand and I appreciate your patience in explaining and your passion, of course. But I wanted to get a little bit of clarity lang. My one last question before I have to leave. On the kind of incentives being granted, because yun nga, when you talk about a one health system, I'm always worried that in our excitement to do one thing, we neglect the others. And I want it to be a balanced wheel. So hindi yung, and I love research, don't get me wrong. I fully support research. So if this is really going to be the research arm of the entire health system, and you tell me, Secretary Herbosa, that okay na yan kasi lahat naman nung health researches natin can basically, I don't know, get their support from there, go there, I guess it's okay. But this is virology. What about the others? What about cardiovascular health? What about mental health? What about women's health? I believe it is equally important. So I'm very worried, and this is my job in the Senate, being one of the more senior senators. I remind everyone every time I see something, what it might affect something else that we passed before. Like, oh, ba't yan binigyan nyo ng incentive? Eh, may ganito tayo, walang incentive yan. So, nandito, it's all becomes lopsided when we don't see the full picture. So, can you discuss it among yourselves? You can give me an answer now, or you can discuss it among yourselves. I want to support research. I want to support virology research, but I don't want it to be at the expense of other equally important health-related research. And then I'll have other colleagues who will also say, we can't give that much to health. They want to give it to national security other than health. Because to me, this is a national security issue. Health is a national security issue. But others will say otherwise. They'd rather give it to some other activity. Yeah, yeah.
I have an answer for you, and I think it's in other laws that the Senate and legislature has passed. For example, there were people that were pushing for the newborn screening law. Because we passed that law, we became a leader in the region and in the world of detecting genetic diseases early
I
and
agree
intervening.
naman,
So it grew.
I'm not aware
So-
that that's a billion plus endeavor. I know because I
that's-
lobbied for that. I wasn't a
For that,
senator
yes.
yet. I lobbied to my father for that.
For that.
because-
So that's
yeah.
one thing that's where science and law went together and then built something like building a road and then created the
No,
business.
no problem.
So-
But then you didn't incentivize that versus others. That's my issue. This is being incentivized.
Ma'am, meron din incentive ito. This one also creates an incentive because I have a sister who's a PhD in biochemistry. After her scholarship in the US, she decided not to return because there's no laboratory to take her field of study.
Okay.
So that's another. We have many, and they've recruited, I think, 5 virologists who are Filipino
I know,
descent
but
willing to come back. That's
I don't
also.
think you're not responding to my question. What about the other fields of health that we are not now incentivizing? Are you saying na you're okay with the Virology Institute getting the bulk of the incentives for the health professionals? That's that's what it is. That's what it is. So a
Well, the other
cardiologist.
question is, are we going to put it away for other diseases or let it happen and then, like for example, when we put up the Philippine Genome Center in UP, we put it up for cancer and genomics because that was what it was talking about. But then COVID came and then we used it for biosurveillance, so biogenetic surveillance. So it gave us something also better to use to help us fight COVID. So my pitch here is that investing in science is like investing on a railroad or a big highway that creates all other opportunities. So my thinking here is, yes, I will support the virology in that particular aspect because my healthcare will improve when I have more virologists working in the Philippines doing studies on several virology
Versus
diseases.
other fields. That's my question. Versus other fields. No. Seriously, I'm not pitting you against each other. I'm not. I need you to put yourselves in the future. And what if lahat ng graduate natin, virology na lang ang natin, major natin kasi ito yung magandang incentives. Yun lang yung tanong ko. That is my job. to make sure that so nagtayo tayo ng meron tayong doktor para sa bayan. So we are funding these medical schools, but I insist that even though wala tayong pharmacist para sa bayan, physical therapist para sa bayan, occupational therapist para sa bayan, radio technologist para sa bayan, sinasabi kong pondohan nyo din yan. Kasi hindi naman aandar yung doktor para sa bayan, doktor, na wala naman yung mga allied health professionals to help. So that's what I'm saying, okay? When we finalize this, just explain to me how you will ensure that primary healthcare is still taken care of, yung ibang specialty areas na possible. If you tell me, you know what, Pia, 99% of the health issues we will have will be virology related. Eh, di tapos na kwento, uwi na tayo. Kasi 99%. But I know that's not the fact. That's not the fact. The number of deaths we had during COVID were not necessarily just COVID related. So, yun nga eh. Yun lang. Yun lang. I don't have a problem with it na. I just want to understand. I'll break it down because I still have to understand the details. I just know may incentive provisions doon. Oh, pero last na tayo.
Yeah, Madam Chair. I'll make it very brief. The primary purpose of the VIP, and if you will imagine, you remember, the name is Virology and Vaccine Institute. Maybe you'll be surprised. Why do we have to mention vaccine and virology separately? We can just call it Virology Institute of the Philippines. It's precisely because if you say Virology Institute of the Philippines, you're only going to deal with viruses and everything related to viruses. But we all know that there's a gap as far as vaccine development, not just for viruses, but also for the other organisms, TB, the other viruses, other antimicrobial resistant organisms. The vaccine component there will actually look at not just viruses. They will also look at other organisms. So there are 4 pillars po sa VIP. You have fundamental research on virology. That will really be virology. But the other 3 pillars, diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines, will not be just confined to virology. It will be looking at other organisms. But this is R&D. Of course, yung mga sinasabi niyo po ay mga nurse, that is really sa DOH. But we're focusing on making sure that we're covering all fields, especially for after vaccine development. And that will be covered.
Nurse, sabi ko PT, OT, radio. I'm very clear.
Well, anyway,
allied
health.
says nurse, and I specifically excluded nurse, to
Opo.
be clear.
Sige po. Oh, anyway, sorry po.
No,
It's a preformed, I always think of nurses. But as I was saying, R&D, the 3 pillars will look at other organisms.
And obviously you're very well versed with your version. I asked my staff because the versions we had read before did not include vaccine. So thank you for that explanation. That is very convincing for me. Sabi ko, hindi ko alam na yung, well, I mean, I know but yeah, your explanation was very good. Again, I will just say pa rin na, so given all that, then the research in all those areas, parang sinabi mo nang sinakop na niya kasi rin yung iba. So let's see. I will be very candid naman with my future questions. So thank you, everyone. This is a fairly late hearing. Thank you for your time. We will be in touch. We may have another hearing or we may just have a TWG. So this hearing is suspended. Thank you.